everyone. Thanks for joining, and welcome to another session of our Day One and Beyond series, where we take you through various topics and activities related to building out on Oracle Cloud. Our today's session is Cost Management and Governance QuickStart, where we will take you through the different OCI tools used to keep track of cloud resources and consumption costs. I'd like to introduce myself and Jason as the main presenters. And like always, a quick reminder to use the Q&A box down at the bottom of the screen for any questions throughout the session. We have panelists who will be answering the questions. And with that, I will hand it over to Jason.
Thanks, Olivier. So I'm super excited about today's session because it's going to be kind of based on things we hear in the field from our customers, common challenges. It's going to be some of even the things we find out internally and how our tools work. And it's going to be very demo heavy today. So hopefully the demo gods are kind to us and don't smite us anywhere in today's presentation, and the demos are going to follow that. But with that, why don't we go ahead and get started? So we're going to focus on a few different tools to solve some of the common problems that you see out there in the field today with your own tenancies or just part of your initial onboarding. We're going to look at the kind of easy tools like cost analysis, the Financial Ops Hub, and Resource Explorer to figure out those 100-level questions everybody gets asked about consumption and where my resources at and where is the spend happening within my environment. And then we're going to dig into a few more kind of intermediate level tools for those people that are maybe in a more of an operational role or a FinOps role. And we're going to look at tools like ShowOCI and usage to ADW to really kind of dig into the meat of finding some information about what's going on in the environment and forecasting what my costs are going to be. And then at the end, we get some time. We're also going to jump into Cloud Advisor to kind of what's the easy button? How are easy ways that I can save cost if I need to look at my consumption and cut a little off my monthly spend? Okay. And like as I mentioned, we're going to bounce through some slides to talk about some of that high level information about how these tools can be used and some foundational knowledge about what goes under the tools to make them work. And then we're going to flip back and forth between Olivia and I and attempt to try to get some demos along the way to show you how we use these tools and how customers have solved common challenges. Okay. So first common challenge. I heard this from one of my customers a few months back. It was they're working with one of their teams that was going to retire a very large environment using a lot of compute. It was costing them about $100,000 a month in just compute costs, and they'd migrated to a new solution. And as they're working with this team, the FinOps guy kept telling me that team keeps telling me that they've retired an environment, but I don't see it in any of my financial reporting tools, right? And I want to be able to go dig into the details and find out what they retired, if they retired anything, and maybe bring that same information back to them in case they're unaware maybe some things got left behind. Okay. And some of the things we're going to talk about to address that scenario is we're going to give you some foundational knowledge, and we're going to show you how it works a bit. And the foundational knowledge is going to be real quick. It's around compartments and tags. And we're going to use two tools that are going to answer that scenario I just put up there. One's going to be that cost analysis service, kind of that 100-level tool. And then we're going to pair that up also with what you can do with Resource Explorer and some of the tools in the console, and also in Cloud Shell that you can start searching for the kind of resources that may be of interest to you as part of your forecasting and consumption. Okay. So most people are aware of this, but I'll give you the kind of high level if you're new to the cloud. There's two topics that you need to understand when it comes to cost consumption that are very important that just kind of give you a quality of life, make it easier to organize your resources. And it is compartments, which are just logical boundaries of where you put your resources in. Think of them like boxes, right? They don't change the network. They don't change the regionality of where you put those resources. They're just containers so that you can say this group of resources all belong together, like production or your e-commerce or your supply chain or your manufacturing. And then tags, everybody that's got a cloud platform, us, AWS, GCP, all the other providers, have the concept of tags, and it basically is just additional metadata that you add to those resources when you're deploying them or down the road after they've been deployed. Think of it like I want to tag these resources as productions, maybe some other resources as sandbox. Maybe I want to put some auto tagging in there about who created it or who to contact if there's an issue. Okay, I'm not going to get too much more deep into the definition of that. But these are kind of two very critical components to make life easier when you're trying to figure out where am I spending money, where are those cost centers at, and how can I kind of slice and dice the data to understand what my forecast may be in the future. Okay. Commonly, most groups are going to take their compartments and they're going to break them up into like infrastructure compartments, like the network team, or they're going to break them up into like non-prod and prod are two common strategies we see. Okay. Tags, most people can use tags a very similar way, right? You're going to put in there some sort of metadata about the environment that's interesting, prod, non-prod, who owns it, what is the server, what is the database used for. Okay. And then put together, you can use these both tags and compartments together to, figure out what your consumption is. You can also use them for things like access control as well, right? And together they give you a lot of different powerful ways of figuring out who has access to resources and who's spending my resources within OCI.
And so one of the questions that we get from customers is, how do I automate the process of tagging my resources or enforce that? And so that's something I'll be covering a little bit more in the demo, but you can do so with tag defaults. And it's usually best practice to set up that tag default at the same time of creating that compartment. Because if you create that compartment and then you create a few resources in that compartment and then you set that tag default, those resources won't be retroactively tagged. But we'll also take a look at in the console ways of viewing the different resources in your compartments, as well as managing the tags for that.
Yeah, thanks for adding that, Olivia. And again, I know you've had a lot of good field experience here recently around tags. And so if you wouldn't mind, this is going to be one of those places we're going to switch between you and I. Could you kind of walk us through how you use tags, how you can retrofit, add tags later? Again, just to make sure that we all have good, foundational knowledge of the core components that go into costing. That, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to hand it on over to you to do a little demo on tags.
Right. Thanks, Jason. All right, so I'm going to switch into the home screen of the console. All right, so to get started with tagging, you first need your tag namespace in place or your container for your different tag keys. All right, so another thing you also want to make sure when working in OCI is that you're working in the correct compartment. So for creating your tag namespace, all you really need to do here is just give it a name that's unique across your tenancy. And then from there, you can start creating your different tag key definitions. So let's say you want to tag a resource by environment, dev, test, or prod. That's one way you can go about it. And so we have different tag key definitions. And if you want to create one, what you need to do is give that tag key a name, unique within your namespace, give it a description, and then you can make it cost tracking or not. But this used to be more applicable with something called budgets in OCI. So in the past, it used to be when you set a budget, it would be either on a tenancy, a compartment, or a cost tracking tag. But now it can be on any defined tag. And then you can define the tag value type right here. So it could be a static value where a user can enter a string to set a value for that key. Or going back to earlier, it can be a list of values. So if you want to do dev, test, or prod, you can tag it by environment. So yeah, those are your tag key definitions. We have a few examples right here, so you can see if it's a string, a list, if it's cost tracking or not, if it's active. So you can retire some of these or you can delete them. And if I go into type, you'll see right here, it uses that example of dev, test, and prod. And I can always go ahead and modify this if I want to change the list or make this a static value. So that's how you get started with creating your tag namespace and your different tag key definitions for what you want to tag your different resources with. So now going back to earlier, let's say you want to enforce that for a particular compartment or automate the process of that. So you'd go to your compartments right here, and then go to the compartment that you want to create that tag default on. So I'm going to go into Vision Corp right here. So this is just a fictitious company. And so you can see tag defaults right here. And you can see we already have a tag default created. So I can always, delete this or modify it. Or I can create another tag default. So I would select that tag namespace that I created. So maybe I do type, and I can make it a default value or I can do a user applied value in this case. So if I just want the default value to be dev from this list, I can select that, test, or prod. And so once again, just to reiterate, it's best practice that you create this tag default at the same time as creating this compartment, because if you create that compartment, create a few resources in that compartment, and then create that tag default later on, it won't retroactively tag those resources, but there is one way in the console that you can manage those tags. You can also do this through a script if you wanted to, but if you go to governance and admin and you go to your Tenancy Explorer, this tool will show you all the different resources that were created in your different compartments. So right now, it's just searching through the different resources in our root compartment right here. I can also select to show resources in my subcompartments. And then once it shows all the different resources in this compartment, the neat thing is that I can select those resources, go to Actions, and then select Manage Tags. So if I want to add additional tag, I can go ahead and do so here. If I want to remove a tag or make any changes, I can do so through Tenancy Explorer. So it gives me insight into not only the different resources in my different compartments, but also managing the tags for those resources. And then lastly, just in general, if you are tagging a resource, so let's go to instances right here. And if I click create instance, I fill out all the information here and I scroll all the way to the bottom. And one thing you may note when working with tags, sometimes it might be under advanced options. So don't worry, it should be there. And then you'll see tags right here. So there's something called free form tags. This is more unmanaged metadata. So anyone with permissions can go ahead and tag this or create a tag right here. Or there's more managed metadata that your admins are managing with your defined tags. And defined tags have more features too compared to your freeform tags. But you can see right here, just a manual process. I could, add that tag, add another one, but just want to show you what that looks like. And then if you want to get a little bit more insight into maybe cost or usage around your different tags. So once again, if you're tagging by environment like dev and you want to know the usage or cost around that, there's something called cost analysis, and I'll pass it back to Jason to take us through that.
And there's one question there in the chat from Hayden. The question is there a way to tag my assets that are using BYL services? Hold that question. I may be able to answer that with a demo, and it's a super common question we get in the field of how to figure out, especially for databases, how to figure out my BYL licenses. Give me 1 second, and we'll get to that in a couple slides. And if I don't answer it, put that question back out there again, and then we'll see if we can answer it a different way. Okay. Okay. So we talked a little bit about how to use tags, right? And one of the services we're going to bring into that original story, right? The original story was we were going to retire some resources, but the FinOps or operational person needed a way to validate that, right? Tags and compartments, made sure we could find the resources. We're going to use this, the first service is cost analysis. So cost analysis is like the 100-level service, right? You can't get a ton of detail out of it, but it is useful for a couple scenarios, and it is useful for pulling out data quick. And oftentimes I can answer most questions with customers, probably 25% of the time with this tool alone, and a couple tricks I'm going to show you. But the major reason you use this tool is I've got a couple easy queries like dates and times. I maybe want to figure out the SKUs, the description of those SKUs, and maybe add in a couple different parameters. Okay, so it's not going to answer the hard questions, but if you got something easy, this is probably going to be your go-to service. All right, so with that, let me jump in the console here and show you around and maybe show you a couple tips you didn't know about this tool. Okay, so here we are in the cost analysis service, right? And where you can find this in your own tenancy is if you go to the hamburger menu, cost and billing, you got your cost management tool, and here's cost analysis right here. Okay, but as you can see on the screen right now, I've got just a very simple query that I put in there, kind of the basics of what this tool can do. A start date of April, end date of the 30th, so I've got several months here, and I wanted to kick out the service and product description. And down here, you can see I've kind of got, across my whole tenancy, all the different types of services I'm using, and for each month, a different breakdown of what they are consuming. Okay, and if I wanted to, you could make a shorter date range and get it down to, interval days. And what's real nice, if you've ever used this tool and haven't seen it, is being able to download a CSV. And so this oftentimes is part of the answer to the question of how can I do more with this tool is you figure out what query you want, and downloading it as a CSV lets you do a little more slicing and dicing of data. Okay, but one thing that I've noticed when I work with different teams on this is most people don't click on this tab here. All right, and this tab here lets you add a couple more interesting dimensions, especially on the backdrop of us talking about tags and compartments. So let me show you that small trick some people don't run into. So I can create a custom report, right, by compartment. And I can say I want to be able to slice it up by compartment, compartment names so it's friendly to read. I want all the compartments or, a parent or two down. And I want to get that same service and product description. All right. And I'll hit this button and it takes about 30 seconds to run. So I'm just going to flip over to another tab so we don't have to wait as the clock spins. And what I get when I run this by compartment report is same thing, April to September, right? And by compartment, what is each compartment consuming, right? And the graph, although not very useful, again, remember, we can still download this data by CSV. And this is normally what most of the customers I work with do is find the date range, find the type of information you're looking for. And again, we could have gone in and did the same thing with by tag, as we were talking about earlier, and then pick tag as how we want to, one of the dimensions, and then broke down to the tag we want and so forth. But most of my customers for easy questions will use the default report, maybe by compartment, maybe by tag to answer those very, I need information by the end of the day, or I need to figure out if a particular group has done something to the compartment to lower how much they're consuming, or if they have growth and you want to dig in a little farther. Okay. So let me jump back out of that again. That's all I'll say about cost analysis service. We're going to show you some more powerful tools than just this one though today. Okay. One of the things you're going to see with a lot of these costing tools, because we're going to throw a few at you today. Some are in the console, some are going to be via external projects we're going to get into. But a lot of the costing information within OCI is going to be brought into this new FinOps hub. Now, this is a new service that came out this summer. It's still pretty new, right? I wouldn't say you're going to get a lot of information there yet, but as we go along and add additional enhancements and features to all of our cost and governance services, they're going to start being pulled all into this as your one-stop shop. And you'll see this as part of our strategy for a lot of things in OCI. You'll see this with the networking tools, right? You'll see this with the security tools that there's lots of tools there, and oftentimes you need a roll up. And so you're going to see hubs inside the OCI console that roll this information up and allow you to drill back down into the various services that provide you some of that high level information from the hub. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about the hub. If you're in a FinOps role, it might be something you just keep an eye on for the next, say, 6 months to a year to see as we bring in more services into these hub type interfaces. Okay. And Livia, this is a topic I think around quotas that you've actually had some recent experience with. So if you don't mind, rather than me talk about this one, can you go ahead and just kind of roll through the slide and talk about quotas and usage reports?
Yeah, so first off, there's something to be aware of when working in OCI. There's two different types of limits. So first off, you have your service limits, which are set by Oracle on your tenancy based off your contract. So maybe Oracle might set a service limit of 30 VCNs or something for your tenancy. And you can always request a service limit if needed, but you have your service limit set by Oracle. You also have something called quota limits set by your admins on your different compartments. So maybe if your admins want to get a little bit more granular with the number of resources that are being created, maybe to limit the number of expensive resources being created, they can do so with quotas right here. And the neat thing on the right hand side in the picture, uh, this is from a page in the OCI console. So it would let you know what your service limit is for a particular resource, so how many are used, how many are available for that specific resource. And then from there, you can actually create a quota policy stub. So it'll help you draft the statement right here. So setting a certain resource, so in this case, compute core quota big data core count to a particular number and a particular compartment. So help you with drafting that statement, and you can get even more granular with a where statement, so maybe in a particular region or something like that. But it's a pretty neat page in the console that help you get insight into your service limit, but also draft that quota policy limit.
So let me ask you a question on this, because honestly, I haven't got a chance to work with this quite as much as I think you have. Would I be correct in saying that, if I was a customer and I had a sandbox environment and I didn't want people spinning up, 15 Exadata, X9M infrastructures, right? One of our more high performance database, and it's more expensive. Could you do something then with quota to say in my sandbox compartment, you can't spin up 15, 20, 100, some crazy number of resources that might be inherently expensive?
Yes, you can certainly set the limit on that. And the neat thing is this actually ties into another tool that we kind of mentioned earlier. It's called budget. So In OCI, once again, you can set a budget on a tenancy, it can be on a tag, or it can be on a compartment. So let's say you set a budget of $1,000 for a particular compartment. So maybe your infrastructure compartment or something like that. And you can set up optional budget alert rules. So you can say, hey, I want to know when I've hit my budget or a certain percentage of my budget or something like that. And in that case, Oracle won't enforce that budget. It'll just let you know, hey, you've reached your budget. But if you actually want to enforce it, there's this function out there called the zero quota limiter, and it uses quotas to prevent any new resources from being created or actually enforce that budget. So just to tie it back in, it's a very, very useful tool for preventing, expensive resources from being created or the number of that.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a good option. I know even in our internal tendencies, we set things up for customers as demos. And honestly, after the demo's set up, I'm exhausted. I just walk off and forget about those resources. So this is probably something internally would be good for us in our own internal tendencies as well. Okay. Okay, so this is one of my other favorite scenarios, and I've talked about this one in the past, but this one comes from a story about a year and a half ago. And I had a reoccurring meeting with a customer each week near the end of the day. And when I got this meeting, I had a DBA that jumped on that I'd known for a long time that was definitely in a bad mood for the day, was just frustrated. And the story was her leaders had asked her that they wanted to know all the BYO licenses, all the license included licenses, and the edition type for all the databases in OCI. Now they had, oh my gosh, they had like 300 databases, and she was still kind of new to OCI, longtime DBA, new at the OCI, and she'd spent the whole day clicking through the OCI console, right? Going through 300 some odd databases, trying to navigate the compartment structure and find everything. And by the time she got to our meeting, she just had it, right? And it was, I remember this call just like it was yesterday. It was, as soon as we started off, is there anything we can help you with? And it was the story. And then there's got to be a better way. I've been doing this for 6 hours and I'm tired of clicking through your OCI console. And there's a couple tools that we're going to show you today. My favorite's ShowOCI, but I'm going to show you a tool we used that day to kind of get her some initial information. And Olivier is going to show you a demo on ShowOCI, which is the better way to get the information. But we're going to show you how this works, okay? So I'm going to start off with Resource Explorer. This is a tool inside the console and that you can run via the CLI. All right, and it's just search capability to look for resources across your compartments. Right, if you've got an advanced compartment strategy, you've probably got infrastructure, you've got prod and non-prod for different groups. The e-commerce team has a set, supply chain has a set, manufacturing has a set, and after you deploy some resources, right, searching through that can be a challenge, right? And this tool allows you to search the entire tenancy or a single compartment and even search with conditions like state, stopped, started, running, aired out to find resources. All right. So I'm going to show you how to do this one. And I'm going to tee up also while I'm in slide mode here. So I'll bounce back and forth. Olivia is going to show you ShowOCI. Now, ShowOCI oftentimes is better. And this is a GitHub project that one of our very smart people maintains along with several other tools we'll show you today. It's maintained by Adi Zohar. He's one of our mad geniuses inside Oracle. This tool is great when you need to get all the data about your resources, right? I want every little juicy bit of information about my databases and my compute and so on and so forth, right? This is the tool. If you forget everything else we tell you today, this is one of the tools I definitely want people that are in operations roles and FinOps roles to walk away from, okay? But with further ado, let me stop sharing. Let's show you how a few of these things work. And I'm going to start, and then I'll flip it over to Olivia in just a hot second here. So back in the console again. Hey, and things haven't timed out yet, which is amazing. I'm just going to do a quick, making sure this guy is, oh yeah, not Windows. Okay, so we talked about resource query tool and advanced resource queries, right? Things you can do in the console. And oftentimes, if you've ever been in OCI, you've seen the search bar up here and you type things in, and sometimes you find things, sometimes you don't. It can be frustrating when you're trying to find a server to type something in here and it gives you a list of 1,000 things that are named like that server, but not what you're looking for. But most people don't click on this right here, okay? And this is what we're going to play around with today, and I'm going to show you how to do it in Command Shell or Cloud Shell as well. So here in Advanced Query Resource Tool, what you can do is you can put in specific queries for things you're looking for. So I could put in something very basic, like if I wanted to find, for example, all those databases, right? Again, our problem was how do I find all the databases across my entire tenancy? We could say, let's look for all the base database systems. So query, base database systems, resources type, hit search, and across my whole tenancy, it's going to dump me back a list of all the different databases that I have out here. Okay. If I want to do something, a little more specific, maybe I've got 300 databases and I just care about ones that are in my compartment. And whether I have a few or one or two, same type, right? Querying my base database systems where the compartment, and you need to know the OSID of that compartment. And this is mine. I can do a search and it comes back with mine. Okay, now what this is useful, right, is not actually that you would want to do this all the time, right? Because you can't automate this, which is, the bummer of this tool, but it is useful that you can search for resources and find interesting things so you can automate. So I can take that same query that I just put up there above, come down here to Cloud Shell, again, using the search service, resources. I'm looking for base database systems where I've got, it's my compartment. And I can come out here, and if I expand this out a little bit, here's all the metadata that you didn't quite see in the console. Now, someone asked earlier, BOL licenses, right? When I was working with that DBA, a year ago, this is one of the things we started playing around with to try to figure out how do I get you all the license information. And as you can see, this instance is on license included versus BOL. Okay, and you can see that it's running standard edition, and you can find some other interesting information about that system. So you could take this tool on our search capability, right? Search, and you could automate it. Or you could use a different tool that I'm going to let Olivia here show you here in a little bit that we've done some of the heavy lifting for you to do pretty much the exact same thing, but we've wrapped it up all in a tool that allows you to just put in a couple different syntax switches to figure out what resource you want, what compartment you want to focus on, what region you want to focus on, or whether you just want to get all the information everywhere. Okay. With that, I'm going to switch it over to you, Olivier, to show us the ShowOCI tool.
So yeah, just once again, ShowOCI is just a reporting tool which uses the Python SDK to extract a list of resources from your tenancy. It's going to cover most of the OCI components, and you can do a variety of different things with ShowOCI. So you can run a report for all compute and database resources and also produce the CSV file using Cloud Shell. And there's several different examples right here. And if you want to get started with this, there was that slide that Jason was showing earlier. So you would clone this, and then you would go to the ShowOCI directory. And then from there, you can start running some of these reports. And one thing to keep in mind, maybe you might want to look for resources in a particular compartment or region. This might also be good to note because if you do it in general, it will take a while to run. But there's several different examples right here. And so I've already pulled up Cloud Shell. You can launch it right here. And the nice thing about Cloud Shell is that it already has pre-authenticated OCI CLI or a lot of this stuff already set up for you. So I'm going to maximize this right here. All right, so I've already cloned the repository. So I have ShowOCI right here. So I'm going to go into ShowOCI. And then let me copy my command that I was going to use. So this is just to show all the different database resources in Ashburn region and then our infrastructure compartment. Just because once again, if you don't note some of this, it might take a while to run. It'll look for a lot of different resources. All right, so you can see that's starting to run right here. All right, so it's fairly quick in this process, but I can get some of the information right here about the different database resources in my infrastructure compartment in the Ashburn region. So I can see all these details here. So fairly quick process. And then I can also export this once again. So if I want the CSV file or JSON file, I can go ahead and get that as well. But this is what it's going to look like and how you can get started with ShowOCI. And then, yeah, you can see the summary right here.
So scroll up there, if you wouldn't mind, Olivier, and just scroll. I think, have you got any databases that have got the BOL license or license included? If not, that's okay. A little bit higher. It's safe. Yep, keep going, keep going. I know you and I should have worked this out earlier, but this is part of the attempting the demo gods. And that's okay. Okay. Stop. Yes, stop it anywhere there. So, like I showed on my screen earlier, with like a base database system or Exadata or anything with like an Oracle database license, ShowOCI will give you a list of all those databases. And just like I had when I was running the search command, it'll show you which ones have BOL and which ones also have the ability to be license included in the edition type, right? Extreme, high, standard, and the CPU count. Okay. Olivia, would you mind on this? Well, you got the screen up here, especially in Cloud Shell. Just show the team where they can actually download files from the little gear. Because with ShowOCI, there is some syntax where you can download or create all the same data you have on the screen in a CSV. And then with Cloud Shell, thank
Yes,
you.
you can download right here. And then I think in some of the example commands is that it would produce the CSV file for you. So that's kind of another way that you can do it. So I'll say CSV right here. And then I think there was a JSON example too. So that's another way that you can produce that file.
And I see two questions in the chat. One from Andrew, and I'm going to type just part of it here, but I'm going to make sure I also explain it as well. What kind of access do I need for using ShowOCI? Okay, so Olivia was showing how to do this in Cloud Shell. And anything you run in Cloud Shell, any kind of CLI commands, or like what I was doing with the search command, it's going to run under the exact same credentials that you end up having when you log on to the console. So when I log on to like the console I was showing, I had read all resources in tenancy, right? So it said my policy was something like allow my group, whatever that name was, to read all resources in tenancy. So anything that I'm doing in Cloud Shell, whether it's the search command or show OCI, was done with that exact same level of access. And if you were going to be accountable for running something like show OCI or one of the other tools we'll show you here in a bit, or the search command, as a FinOps person or an operational person that's accountable for getting all this information, I would highly recommend working with your Cloud InfoSec team to get read all resources and tenancy level access, or at least read all resources in your compartments so that you can pull all this rich data out with tools like the search service or the show OCI service or another one we'll show here in a bit. So Andrew, I hope that answers your question. If not, put a follow-up in there in the chat and I'll try to get that as well. I see another question on how the clone for show OCI is updated. And I might need Olivia a little bit of help on this one because I'm not a developer, but I can tell you that it's a project that we maintain out on the GitHub repository. And I put a link in there in the chat for show OCI. One of our experts, again, Adi Zohar, and a few other Oracle people support it. It's not something you can call in like a service ticket on if there's issues, but it is absolutely something that we've kept up to date with customer feedback, right? The ability to search for licenses and additions was feedback I got from that one customer I was speaking about, the DBA. It was her feedback that we worked with Addy and his team to build up the additional functionality to pull all the license information back. And we got that done within 24 hours. So the next day, instead of using the search service, we shifted gears and we started using Show OCI instead.
But yeah, that's all I really had to show for show OCI. And the nice thing is that it covers a lot of the different stuff in the documentation right here and even goes over some of the policies that Jason was mentioning earlier. So it depends if you're doing a user group or maybe you're working with instance principals and dynamic groups, but it mentioned some of that here for
Yep.
show.
Before we get the next demo, one of the things I also get questions on when it comes to show OCI is, do I have to run it in Cloud Shell? No. You could run it locally on your desktop if you get the CLI set up in your credential file. But what is more interesting is with show OCI, you can almost use it as a poor man's CMDB. So if you start to deploy a lot of resources in OCI and you want all the information, I want all my databases, all my compute, every bit of information you can think of, clear down to what's in my route tables. Show OCI can get that, but it takes a while to run, right? And the larger your environment gets, the longer it takes to run. And Cloud Shell's got a limit of, it's like, I think 30 minutes and it times out. What most customers end up doing if they want to go down that route and have show OCI run every night and grab all the data, not just databases, is they'll run it on like a Linux instance inside their environment. And they'll create a dynamic group so that that Linux instance can act as itself to do read all resources and tenancy. Again, I'll say that by 1,000 times today, but so that Linux instance can use that read all resources and get all the information and drop it locally on the server. And then they can pull it off or they can load it into ADW or some other service for additional analytics. But I've got several customers that do exactly that. So they've just got all the metadata refreshed every single night on everything running in their environment. Okay. With that, we talked about loading data into ADW. We've talked about costing stuff. Olivia, I'm going to let you keep the screen for a second. Could you show us the usage to ADW, which is another project by the same, creator as ShowOCI? And what usage to ADW actually do is instead of getting all the metadata about, all your resource in your environment, it gets the costing information. So today we showed you a little bit around the cost analysis service, right? Kind of an easy tool to get the basics. Talked about how the Cloud Hub was going to start bringing all that rich information in. We've brought a couple more operational focus tools that FinOps people can use to find resources. But what is a really good tool that most people want to get to is how can I bring that all together so I can have all that rich data and I can, explore and kind of figure it out without having to use each one of these, tools on their own or try to put something together on my own. And usage to ADW is kind of like the third level step of what you want to get to. So, Olivia, could you go ahead and kind of dig into this and show us the demo that we admittedly hastily put together yesterday to make sure we were ready for today's webinar?
Yeah, so real quick, I just want to talk about the setup. So you can do this manually if you want, and there's the steps for that. So what we did is we did it through Terraform, or in Resource Manager in OCI. So Resource Manager is essentially Terraform as a service, so it's going to help with the process of automating your infrastructure and also managing the state of that. And so we did it that way. Okay, so right here, the step number one is pretty important, and Jason knows how long we spent on this. Password is very important. So you want to make sure that your password is meeting the criteria, that there aren't certain special characters in the front of your password, or, is matching the criteria here. Because otherwise you will run into issues like Jason and I did the other day. So very important. So you would store that password in the Vault service or in a secret. So something important to keep in mind. So we've generated the Terraform stack for this. And then from there, it's a pretty straightforward process, just filling out all the different fields in Resource Manager. And then what we did here is we just created the Identity Access Management group or IAM policies right here, because that's pretty important in OCI. Otherwise, it's going to be denied by default. So we'll create those policies so that you have the access and everything. This was just networking, and this is another area to keep in mind. After we set it up, we ran into some further errors, so we just needed to further modify some of our security rules in our security list. So just another thing to keep in mind if you're running into any issues. So yeah, we just filled out everything here. Yeah, so you just go through all these steps. So we did the load balancer configuration option, fill out the details here, and then you'd apply it. And then you can also create Oracle Analytics Cloud or OAC, but we didn't do it in this case. We just did Apex and ADW. You'd apply the stack, and then it will set everything up. And then you can log into the Apex application with all the different metrics. So yeah, in the OCI console, I'll show you real quick. So yeah, Resource Manager is under Developer Services. So we created the stack based off the steps. And let me make sure I'm in the correct compartments. Yeah, so we created our stack, and we also did a plan job beforehand just to make sure that everything looked, good to go before actually making those changes. So I'd recommend doing that before applying in general. And so you can see all the different resources it will create. So yeah, you can view that beforehand. So I recommend doing that. And then we went ahead and applied the job. And then from there, it provided several different outputs. So where we logged in was this load balancer Apex URL. And so once you do that, you'll see this page right here. And you can get insight into your current usage. There's different reports that you can generate here. So it's looking at our tenancy. You can select the date and time right here. If there's a particular product service that you want to look into, so compute, product resource. So you can look here. You can also look at the top level compartments. So maybe I might want to do team compartment or something. And this goes back to tags. So if there's a particular tag that I want to track, I can select that right here. I can also filter on region. I could submit this and it will give me insight with some of the different reports here. So yeah, it's just looking at our top level compartment. I can also view this in table if I wanted to as well. I can also look at usage over time. So if I want to see any changes there, it's loading. And then you can also do the same for cost and cost analysis over time. All right, so sorry, my internet's a little bit slow today. But yeah, here we go. So this is usage over time, and once again, I can filter off these different areas. So if I want to do Ashburn region, I just want to focus there, change the time. Top level compartment if I want to, product resource. And I can go ahead and submit that and then get these different reports and see how it's changing over time.
I see we get two questions in here. I want to kind of answer those live as we're going through this as well. The first one, Hayden, I can definitely answer this one. I'm not a developer whatsoever. I could read Python, but I'm sure as heck could not code Python. The first couple of things that I showed you today, right? The service around the cost analytics, you don't need to know anything at all on that one. There's no Python anything. The search command, super easy, right? That's one that, I would construct your searches first in the advanced resource query until you found out the useful information. And then it's pretty easy to take and just swap the syntax in and doing something from basically Cloud Shell, CLI, or somewhere else, right? And you can do some automation from there. ShowOCI, though, dead simple, right? You need to know nothing about Python, right? To run it, it is 3 commands inside of Cloud Shell. 1 to do the clone, 2 to change directory, and 3 just to run it and understand the syntax, right? And the syntax is more of, do I want to get databases? Do I want to get databases in region and so on and so forth? When you get into what you've got here on the screen with the usage of ADW, and this is why I brought Olivier with me, because she's got a lot more knowledge and understanding of how to run resource stacks and troubleshoot them and get things set up with the different Terraform modules we provide. This is somewhere where you probably want to get paired up with someone from your DevOps team, right? I do think that an admin, a FinOps guy could probably get through it. But just like we had yesterday afternoon, if you run into some issues, it does take a little bit of DevOps knowledge to understand, like, why were we getting the password wrong? But this tool gives you a lot more depth than you're going to get from the other tools. So if you can answer your question with the simpler tools, the things out of the console, the things you can do with Cloud Shell, great. If you need more depth, I would recommend maybe pairing up with someone that can help you with this. I'd also recommend pick on your Oracle account team. Right, this is something that we help customers with. It's something I help customers with as part of the different customers I cover. Have them come in and do a deep dive with you. And as part of that deep dive, they can get these tools set up with you and show you how to use some of this stuff. Okay. Next question. Andrew, are we using the Kerr reports for underlying data in OCI? Yes. With cost of usage report, you're using the Kerr. For ShowOCI, you're using the underlying APIs. So depending on which tool you're using, it's pulling from different sources of data. Okay. And then, are the reporting graphs and usage to ADW exportable to CSV? Yes. I don't know if it's in the actual tool itself, but because it's backended by Autonomous Database, if you know even just a little bit about working with ADW, you can dump that data to something like object storage and pull it out. Okay, but I'm not sure if there's anything native in the tool that lets you do that just from that console in Apex. Okay. So Olivier, you and I got to play around with this really like the last 24 hours. With the OCI cost and reporting tool, what was kind of the degrees of difficulty in getting this set up after we figured out the password bit? I mean, how easy would you say would this be to set up for most people that are playing with the cloud or kind of new to OCI?
I would say it's fairly straightforward, especially if you go with the automated approach, because you're just essentially uploading the stack, filling out the different fields right here. And if your password's okay, and then you check your security rules, then you should be fine. But it was mainly the password for us and a few other things in the security list. But other than that, it was fairly straightforward.
Okay. I see we got a few minutes left. Let's see if we can cram and get the last piece done. Let's see if we can get Cloud Advisor done. Because I want to also leave you with what are the easy things I can do to save money. And I'm going to grab a slide And I'm going to pass it back to Olivia one more time here. So I'll set up the story real quick and tell you why this is important. Every year, all of us hit a cost crunch in whatever your financial cycle is, right? And many times I get from customers, I'm coming up to the end of my financials. My leadership team's on me to save costs. I've got like a month left. What can I do? And the easy button is Cloud Advisor. Okay. And what Cloud Advisor does for you is it looks at all the metric information coming off of your compute instances, your databases, the bandwidth you're using from your load balancer, and what's going on with your storage. And it provides you a set of recommendations on what you could be doing to save money. And with some of my larger customers, I've seen monthly savings as much as, the highest I've seen here this year was $26,000 a month that had one of my customers that could save by looking at the recommendations around compute instances that were oversized, load balancers that were on an old type and oversized, and storage that had been just hanging out there and it was orphaned. Block storage that might have been attached to a server or something else. And due to how something was removed or decommissioned, it was just sitting out there orphaned. Okay. Cloud Advisor will also give you information about things that are under provisioned. So if you got a database running too hot, maybe it's running 100% all the time, it's also going to make recommendations like you might want to consider going up the size. And what I find most useful about this tool is two things. One, the opportunity to save money, just a clear number of how much you can save. And two, it will also tell you what size you should be running at. And I'll have Olivia show you here in a second with the recommendations. But if you've got, say, 20 instances, compute instances are all over provisioned, it'll tell you which ones they are, and it'll tell you the recommended size they think they can run at based off the metrics that you decide. And what I mean by is you can say, I want you to look over the past month or 30 days or 60 days. It'll take all that metric data that's coming into our control plane, and it'll base the recommendations off that time period and give you a sizing recommendation for whether it's a database, a compute instance, a load balancer, or if you've got something orphaned like block storage. Okay, this is the easy button. And if you're in FinOps or Ops, this is something you probably ought to keep an eye on minimally quarterly to see if there's some opportunity out there to cost optimize your environment. That, Olivier, show us how this works a bit. Show us a couple of recommendations.
Right. So hopping into the console, to find Cloud Advisor, this is going to be under governance and admin. This is where we've been a lot today, especially with tagging the Tendency Explorer. And I didn't show this, but this is the page where you can get insights into your service limits, and it will also help you draft your quota policies. So a lot of useful tools right here. All right, so going into Cloud Advisor, this is just a high-level overview page where it breaks down the different areas. So you have cost management, high availability, and performance. Security is more of CloudGuard. It has its own page, but it'll give you different security recommendations. We'll mainly be focusing on these three other areas, and you can get a high-level overview right here of the total number of recommendations for each area, the severity of it, and how many have been implemented or how many are pending.
And I just want to comment that the only reason Olivia had $0 in there is she's just missing just a little bit of access.
Yeah.
You will almost never see Cloud Advisor say there is $0 of savings. There'll always be something, but by all means, keep going.
Yes, that's a good point. So you'll see right here, it will say 0 for estimated savings. It should look different for you if you have the permissions and everything set up. But yeah, you can see the different categories here. So if you want to focus on cost management, performance, or high availability, you can filter by each category. So if I want to focus on cost management, I'll select this category. And if you have multiple tenancies, which we do in this case, you can filter that way as well. If there's a particular service that you want to focus on, like autonomous object storage, you can click that way. You can also filter on status. So right now it's just looking at active, but if I want to look at any recommendations that were dismissed or maybe postponed to a later date, I can search that way too. And this will show me all the different recommendations for cost management. You can see not everyone is active. Some have 0 for the count. I have quite a few for enable object lifecycle management. So I see this is object storage. I should, if I have the permissions, see estimated savings, maybe the percentage of the monthly bill, and the importance. Or maybe I might want to focus on the critical recommendation right here. So enable monitoring on compute instances. So I can click into that. And then from here, I can get a further breakdown of the specific resources, and I can take different actions. So I can postpone it to a later date. So I can do so here, or I can dismiss it. So this is more of a manual recommendation. So if I go back to recommendations right here, and I go to life cycle right here, I can click the different recommendations or resources here, get a little bit more insight on the compartments and all this information here, and I can go ahead and implement it. And then you can get more information on this recommendation. So that's mainly cost management. I can do this for performance. Once again, not every category or recommendation is going to have a account right here. And then lastly, same for high availability. So it's
Awesome.
really useful for, taking a look at these different categories and then further breaking down by the different resources so I can focus on cost management and take action on that.
Yeah, and I appreciate you going through that, Liv. I mean, some of these I think are really easy ways that to keep an eye on these that you can go through and find those cost savings. If you got a production environment, there is a workflow here. You probably want to go through your own workflow for addressing these. They'll run every 24 hours, and they'll continue providing you kind of those insights where you can save. I know we're getting short on time, so Olivia, I'm gonna, if you don't mind, let's jump back into the last slide or two, and if you could run us through the last 2 or 3 slides, we'll finish up today's webinar.
Sounds good. All right. So just to recap everything today, so you can use different tools, budgets, quotas, and Cloud Advisor to help track and manage your costs in OCI. So very powerful tools. You also need foundational tools like compartments, so how you're organizing your different resources, and tags, so how you're keeping track of your different resources. And they also tie in with some of these other services like budgets, cost analysis, and all of that. And then lastly, we saw another tool like ShowOCI to extract your metadata on all your different resources in your OCI tenancy. And if you want to learn more, these are some great resources. There's Oracle University, different learning paths. If you want to get hands-on experience, my favorite tool is Live Labs. Highly recommend this. And then there's a few other details here. So you can access all those links. And then we do have our main webinar series, but there are a few other Day One and Beyond series that you can explore. So there's hands-on, cloud native, so please check those out.
Olivia, there is a question here in Q&A panel.
That's a
Some
good
of
one.
our, yeah,
Yeah,
please.
so I see Matt put one out there. Some of the workloads are spiky during the year, the month. Yeah, if you're in retail, it could be the end of the year or a marketing campaign. Manufacturing's definitely got their own cycles. So depending on your industry, you might have spikes in your workload. With tools like, if we're talking about Cloud Advisor, I think that's when the question came out, you can, one, change the period of time of when it makes its evaluations so that if it needs to evaluate a peak period and not just a period that you're in the valley, right, it can pick that up, right? And so you can go wider to make sure you include those peaks as part of the evaluations, okay? Two, the other thing you can do in Cloud Advisor is you can dismiss some of those recommendations. So if you've got a server that, let's just say, 10 months of the year, it does next to nothing. In 2 months, it's super spiky, but you don't want that recommendation to keep popping up into the dashboard and showing some sort of cost savings that's not real. Then you can also dismiss that so it actually goes away. Okay. And if Matt, that doesn't answer your question, and we're talking about a different tool, by all means, hit me up again in the chat and we'll try to apply that to a different question. And Andrew, yeah, can you change the parameters that generate the recommendations? Yes, a little bit. There is and kind of an aggressive to less aggressive setting. So if you want it to give you recommendations based off of a workload, let's take a compute instance that gets down to like 5% utilization, you can actually bump that up to a higher utilization if you want to be more aggressive about things that might be able to be downsized. Now they are fixed. You can't just put in your own number to say I want 7.5% CPU utilization, pop that up in the recommendations, but you can kind of pick a range of not very aggressive to very aggressive in going after those various recommendations that Cloud Advisor is going to bring up and boil up to that dashboard of different savings that you can find. So very configurable. It's configurable on time. It's configurable about how you want it to basically call up that metric, and if you want it to boil it up as part of your overall recommendations that run every 24 hours. Good questions. Yeah. Okay. I know we're at the top of the hour. Olivia, I'm going to let you have this one because you're the expert among our group because you got hands-on. What are the cost tracking tags used for?
Yeah, so in the past, the main use case, especially when you're setting budgets, you can only set a budget on a cost tracking tag. So it had to be cost tracking enabled. But now that's not the case anymore. It can be on any defined tag. So that was the main use case. Or if maybe you're using a tag that's cost tracking and you want to designate it as that for tracking purposes, you can go ahead and do so. But you don't also need a tag to be cost tracking for a tool like cost analysis or anything. So I just want to note that. So you don't need that for budgets or cost analysis.
Nice. So at the top there, I hope you guys found this useful. If any of the tools or things that you find are interesting that you want to bring back in your environment, by all means, please get a hold of your Oracle account team. I'm one of the people that are out there with the customers. Olivia is one of the people that help us when we take a much deeper dive in these tools. But reach out to your teams if you want to take a deeper dive on anything we showed you today or anything you need help setting up. And with that, I appreciate everybody's time. I hope you found today's information useful, and I hope you come back for the next Day One and Beyond series that we come out with. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate your time today.
Thanks, everyone.